Austin Tech Connect is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Founded in 1992, ATC exists to help unite the local technology ecosystem and to encourage the spread of community, collaboration, and conversations in Central Texas. This podcast is sponsored by SailPoint. They are a leading provider of identity security for the modern enterprise, empowering organizations worldwide to put identity security at the core of their business. With a foundation of artificial intelligence and machine learning, SailPoint Identity Security delivers the right access to the right identities and resources at the right time. Now, here is this week's episode.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And we do this podcast so that we can talk about the future of our technology scene in Austin, Texas. Every single week, we engage with local leaders to hear their stories of success and to get their advice on how we can all thrive into the future. Now, if you're a regular listener to the show, this is the second episode of 2024, and you may have noticed that we have a brand new sponsor this year for the show. We are presented by SailPoint, so I want to call them out and say thank you so much for sponsoring the show and making this able to happen week after week after week. So this week, I am joined by an old friend of mine. I am joined by George Bonelli. He is the managing director of Acceleratize, which is a brand new boutique consulting firm that specializes in aerospace, marine, emergency services, and a couple of other industries, helping companies organize chaos and grow. You know, George really believes that one of the key things to be able to grow a business is to be really focused on relationships. And I can tell you firsthand, that's true. I've known George for about 15 or more years, and he's always been really good at just being supportive of his friends. And when I got to the Austin Technology Council, he was a member of ATC and has continued to support what we're trying to do with the Austin Technology Council. So I love people who always have your back, and George Bonelli is one of those persons. Hey, George, welcome to Austin Tech Connect.
Right on, Tom. Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have a chat with you, and look forward to just kind of, talking through a couple things and kind of having like a beer at the bar kind of conversation. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, you've been around the Austin tech scene for about 25 years. If I remember correctly, you moved here originally for a job with Motorola. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah. Back in about 98.
So
when,
what were you doing?
Things were much different.
Yeah, they were a lot different in 98. What were you doing for Motorola at that time?
At the time, I was a program manager, and so I had responsibilities for programs, upwards of $40 to $50 million. They were. I came from the Northeast, so I was working with customers in the New Jersey, New York area. These were large telecommunications. So think about radios in cop cars. Think about radios in fire trucks. Connecting all those together. Actually, one of our clients was a major transit company in the Northeast, and so all radio systems and CAD, computer-aided dispatch systems that covered the entire state. So we literally went out, acquired property, built towers, put buildings, generators, propane tanks, and then we installed technology into cars, and we installed it into buses, and we connected all those things through microwave links and T1 fiber, drops and all those kind of things. And then we had brought the customer in, got them to accept it, review it, and then they put that stuff to work and gave their customers what they came for. So yeah,
it's
pretty interesting stuff.
It is interesting stuff, but it's so interesting to hear all the stuff that you had to create and do 25 years ago to build those types of networks. I assume it's a lot different now for the people who sell that type of stuff to those types of industries.
To some degree, yes. A lot of those systems, do have lots of redundancy requirements, and so the need for microwave links, has changed, and the technologies themselves have changed. Size of the technology has changed, and but I mean the need for buildings, the need for coverage for antennas, and all those things still remain the same. The thing that most people kind of can, an analog would be if they drive by a cell phone site. You see so many cell phone towers. Those are very much the same. There's a building, there's a generator, there's a propane tank, there's a tower, and there's antennas on it. And so, how those sites are connected and how they communicate with each other has changed over time. It's become much more stable and better, but that's the basic concept.
So you were there a couple of years after you transferred with Motorola to Austin, but you stayed a couple of years, and then you decided You wanted to go out in the world on your own and hang out a shingle as a consultant in that program management space. Tell us what led you to say, you know what? I'm going to leave doing this job and I'm going to help other people be really good at doing the job.
Yeah, so what was really interesting is that there was a gentleman that Motorola made a big investment in what they called systems integration. So they made a big investment in program management and program managers. And realizing that by putting that type of skill set and rigor in place, it was going to ultimately benefit their programs and their customers and their bottom line. And so one of the guys that came in, he was a trainer and consultant and built this really awesome systems integration educational coursework. And we spent a couple of weeks in Schaumburg, Illinois. This was like literally my first 6 months on the job there. Going over and learning about the systems integration process, and I'm PMP certified, and the project management body of knowledge, and all those things were part of that learning. And so lots of rigor in that process. And he basically, and I again maintain a relationship with him. Back to your point in the beginning, his name was Randy Iliff, and he was ex Morton Thiokol. He ran, he owned and was managing projects for the space shuttle with hundreds of software coders and engineers building the software in that space. And I always found it super interesting. And I sat down with him one day and I said, "Hey, how do you do what you do?" And he's like, "Well, the thing that really caught me was," he said, "I sit down at the beginning of the year and I choose the weeks and time that I want to myself, and then I sell the rest of my time." And I said, "Well, that's really cool. That's an interesting approach." And then it took me about 8 to 9 years of working at Motorola where I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I have enough underlying skill set where I can now go promote myself as an expert in this space. So I then, a year or so after moving down here to Austin, I then hung out my shingle, built some contact TOs, CIOs, and whatnot with companies in San Antonio and Dallas, and then was able to kind of start to leverage that network and became effectively I call it a project rescue consultant, where we'd come in to technology projects that were failing, work with the responsible senior executive. And in some cases, we had a small harem of consultants that would effectively stop a project, evaluate everything that's going on from scope to team to all the components of that particular project, and then come up with a plan and then kind of restart things and get them back on track. Nice. So it was really interesting. A couple of years of consulting there for sure. That's in the 2000, just before the bubble.
So what was the next phase?
So the next phase, interestingly, became entrepreneurial. Right. So I have these like 3 tiers or 3 legs to my experience, if you will. One being the program management through Motorola, which I call kind of corporate experience. The next phase is moving into that phase where I was able to do that consulting in the project rescue, which I consider a consulting phase. And the next is an entrepreneurial phase, where we effectively built a sailing business in the shared asset space. And this is 2001, 2002, when shared assets weren't really a thing. Sharing, there was no Uber, there was no Airbnb. Sharing is a very typical, normal, and very accepted, business model these days. This is way before that. And so so the cool story is it's built on a sailing story, right? So the business is sailing. It's called Sail Time. And we went sailing, and I learned to sail, and we went to Greece and had this beautiful experience and came back, and we realized that there's so many boats out on the lake, and there's so many people that just leave those boats sitting, bobbing like corks in their slips, and they pay money for them. They pay the boat, the note or the mortgage for the boat. They pay for the slip. They pay the insurance, and they're not using it. So we figured, well, hey, maybe we can actually get some boats and put maybe, 8, 10 people on them and share this asset. So we bought a boat, built a program, developed code, created a schedule, built all the pieces around that business model, and kicked that off. And that business continues today. I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but that business continues today with about 40 locations throughout the U.S. and parts of Europe as well.
Nice. So you wrote the code for all the being able to reserve your time and to keep things moving smoothly with the shared asset?
So it was more of the operations side of it. So I put together all the processes and broke it down into workable pieces. I didn't do the coding, but we had somebody come in and actually write the code. But we did all the whiteboarding. We wrote all the rules, wrote all the. I actually went so far as to help. We turned it into a franchise, right? So I had to literally build whatever it is, 400-page franchise description document and operations manual. So have some experience on the franchise side as well, which was really interesting. Yeah, so
Nice. So you now have this new consulting firm that you and your friend Dean Rudolph have started. And one of the things that you had said to me when you were telling me about the company is that you were able to merge together each of your strengths to create this consulting firm that, really will be able to focus on helping, these specific industries really grow and thrive. Tell me a little bit about this company.
Yeah, great. So basically it's we're, like I said, Dean's got a deep aerospace background. I've got a deep marine and program management background. And so we saw those as two complementary areas that we wanted to bring together. So we're focusing on aerospace EVTOL, which is the electric vertical takeoff and landing, which is, only a couple of years, it's, and growing, right? So there's a lot of potential there. And marine in terms of manufacturing and leisure, shared economy, and emergency services. And so we're doing that through consulting, whether it be strategic consulting, program management consulting, fractional executive services. So if somebody's looking for somebody to lead a particular area, maybe operations and or sales, that is in the startup space, maybe that's looking for someone on a part-time basis, we provide that. And then we have a deep bench of senior and subject matter expert from a staffing perspective we can bring to the table.
Nice. Well, you've been around the Austin tech community for a long, long time. And you've probably seen a lot of things go on. You've had your finger in some of it as a consultant and some of the stuff that you were doing. And of course, now you're back deep into that. What is it about the Austin tech community over the last 25 years that's been the most fascinating to you?
I think the growth, I guess the maturation, we'll say, right? I mean, of course, when I first came down here, tech was a different kind of tech, right? So, I mean, Motorola was a big player in the late '90s, early aughts. Having the semiconductor plants, and then that turned to Freescale and whatnot. But seeing the likes of Google and Apple's campus grow, and Google come into town, and Facebook come into town, and Meta, and and all these different large tech companies kind of spilling out of Silicon Valley. There's always this Silicon Hills, Silicon Valley comparison that goes on. If Austin only had that coast, right, that coastline, it'd be even more interesting for many people. And probably couldn't we would not be able to handle the influx of people if there was some kind of coastline here. So it's the growth has been really interesting. I mean, I'm a cyclist as well, and I remember being able to ride on in places in South Austin, like Southwest Parkway, and out there that those roads are now kind of off limits because the traffic has kind of squeezed riders off the road, or at least ones that don't want to get run over.
I mean, I remember driving Southwest Parkway 20 years ago, and you wouldn't see another car necessarily as you went out.
Nope.
Out to the west.
It was fantastic.
So you've seen a lot of growth. You've seen a lot of maturity. What do you think that our community has done really well to handle that growth? And then is there anything that maybe we should have done a little differently, or we could do a little differently?
I think, Austin has done a good job of maintaining some unique qualities with regards to how it develops, how it focuses the development to the kind of central business district, how it maintains, some height restrictions on construction and whatnot outside of that area. And so I think it's done a good job of that. The challenge that I think the growth has been so rapid that it still struggles with I don't know. I live near 35 now, and driving up and down 35 is there's a lot of traffic. The funny thing is it moves pretty good. I mean, I moved here from the Northeast and New York and whatnot, and I have a very different tolerance. I have a very different traffic tolerance. The there's definitely more traffic than there was a long time ago than in Austin, but there's still not nearly the same amount of traffic that you would see in places around, New York and, going in and out of New York City and things like that. So I would certainly a different perspective on that. So it's not something I complain about.
We're going to take a quick second to thank the sponsor of this episode. Our sponsor is Insperity. At Insperity, it's not just HR outsourcing, it's HR that makes a difference. Their comprehensive, scalable HR solutions offer an optimal blend of service and technology to facilitate growth. They provide the tools to help you lighten your administrative load, maximize productivity, and manage risks so that you can focus on growth, because that's what it means to have a true HR partner. Learn more at Insperity.com. So, with that growth, and you talk about the fact that, the Motorola's and some of the big companies and all that, we've really become known as sort of this startup hub. What do you think is really in the past, really 15 years, really kind of, shaken up and given Austin this whole vibe of a startup community of people going out and starting their own things? Why is Austin such a magnet for that?
Well, I would say that Josh Fair and the Capital Factory have done a lot to put Austin on that map. I mean, when you roll in secretaries of state and presidents through Austin, showing off what Austin's startup capabilities are, and literally incubating, hundreds, if not thousands, of companies through this, and delivering and returning, knowledge to the community in the form of mentors and whatnot. Another thing that Dean and I started doing is helping to be part of those mentors and office hours at the Capital Factory. That's a huge starting point. I mean, that attracted, other accelerators into the Austin market as well. Right. I just recently went to a defense initiative that Capital Factory is holding as well. And so they're, bringing in, the Air Force and Army's different groups around the Army Futures Command.
Yep.
And the Air Force has a similar entity that are effectively closing the gap between innovation and product opportunities and entrepreneurship, trying to bring smart young entrepreneurs, giving them the opportunity to really put products and put their ideas into things that might help national security, which is super interesting.
Yeah, no, and Capital Factory has done a great job of that, and Josh really has helped shape a lot of that around Army Futures and the Air Force Command's similar type group. So as we look towards the future, are you bullish on Austin? What do you think Austin looks like in 5 or 10 years? As far as the tech community?
I am. Yeah. So it's interesting. So I think, if you do your reading and kind of get a sense for what's going on, I mean, I think 2023 was a challenging year across the board, right? The space that I was in, just to kind of bring us to today, I've spent the last about 7 or 8 years in the sales leadership in tech services sales. So like digital services, customer experience services, building specific applications and enterprise applications and whatnot. And it was more specifically around for a couple of nearshore Latin American companies, right? So they see Austin as this kind of launching point, right? So having a presence in Austin is important if you want to attack or approach the U.S. market. Of course, being able to leverage all the connectivity in Austin as well is important, because it's you're one degree of separation away from lots of folks that have needs in that space. So being able to see the growth here in Austin is one thing. Now, when I say the growth, I'm saying that there's kind of technology is lots of different. It's a very diverse space, right? So development and coding and services had a bit of a challenge last year with regards to budgets shrinking. And, funding, startup funding has shrunk. I mean, lots of different things have shrunk. Manufacturing seems to be kind of on the move, right? So it's kind of like, things are always cyclical, and, don't know what the year after next is going to bring. But manufacturing could float things for a while. And I think there's lots of companies in town that are going to continue to push the envelope and continue to evolve and grow and build over the next year as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for sure. And Austin is very well positioned, I believe.
You bring up a really interesting point that I talked to a lot of guests on this show about and a lot of people around town. And that is the fact that Austin has a much more diverse ecosystem within tech than we ever have had in the past. And people, I think a lot of people don't necessarily see it. I mean, we started off, we were a hardware town and semiconductor town. Then we became a software town. In fact, our organization was founded as the Austin Software Council before it became the Austin Technology Council. And then we started getting into, a lot of media tech and a lot of different things. And something would pop up and something else would kind of go away. Now we seem to have a whole bunch of areas. We have a strong fintech. We have a strong military, tech. We have all this different stuff. And I think that makes us a little bit more resilient for ups and downs of the economy. As you said, as manufacturing is continuing to grow and we're luring more manufacturing plants here, that helps us go in that type of time. And then the services companies will help at a different time. I think that's sort of a healthy thing for the future. Do you agree?
I would. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I suspect that, as one piece of that technology ecosystem is thriving and others are in cost-cutting phases or, potentially shrinking to some degree, ideally folks that have to, move from one company to the next can, take their skill set somewhere else and help, apply them to a different industry, which is also good because that gives, folks the opportunity to work across multiple industries and grow their particular expertise over time.
So in your last company and hopefully in your new company, you've been a supporter of the Austin Technology Council. Why do you support organizations like that? And you volunteer at Capital Factory. Why get involved in the community? Why support, the business organizations? A lot of people don't. So why is that important to you?
I don't know. The first thing that comes to mind is why not, right? I think it's important to be able to, one, I was able to draw on those resources and that support, coming up and as I was learning and scraping elbows and knees and struggling through problems and whatnot. I was also part of the entrepreneurs organization. And so one of the things that came out of that experience is what's really important is that, as founders, entrepreneurs, and those that are trying to do startups and such, the reality is that you can't really go and talk to your brother or your mother and father or your partner about the problems you're having in your business. It's because they haven't been there. They don't necessarily understand. And so having a battle-tested group of founders that have been through have solved problems like that before can really accelerate people's growth. It can accelerate their, working through problems. And it's also, it's fun to meet really cool people with really cool ideas, for sure. And actually, the longer you're around, the longer and deeper your network. And why have a network like that if you can't connect people to other people and have them, help, make progress and move their business forward? It's wonderful.
I absolutely agree. And I talk to a lot of people who, they don't understand the benefits. You kind of just covered a lot of them of being active in the community, of supporting something like the Austin Technology Council. And, sometimes I talk to people and they go, well, what's in it for me? Well, there are things in it for you, but in reality, the more you give, the more you get back. And I'm really trying as we work to reinvent the Austin Technology Council to really be that umbrella or that thread that runs through everything tech. And instead of being competitive with the different groups who serve, different areas, it's how can we support each other and how can we uplift each other so that the whole community thrives. And I'm looking for sort of those up and coming, young, civic-minded entrepreneurs who really want to roll up their sleeves. If they've got a tech company, they've got it established, it's growing, they're ready to get involved. Maybe they want some board experience. I'm really looking for who those people are so that they can come along and help us take ATC into the next 3 decades.
Yeah, not to get too metaphysical, but the idea of, if you can go in and help folks without expecting anything in return, that's kind of when things come your way anyway. So it's more about, what can I do to help folks that are, coming through the same path I was. I've got, like I said, got that network, got people I can introduce them to that can help them in particular areas, got some experience to maybe help them think through some things differently. maybe solve a problem that they or see around the corner of a problem they didn't see before. And it's all just fun and exciting, to be honest.
Well, George, before I let you go, I ask every guest who comes on this show, because I'm actually a really deep believer that when we have more community, collaboration, and conversations, we can solve all problems in our society. I kind of wish that that's what they had to live by in Washington, D.C., that every time our elected officials walked into the rotunda at the Capitol, they had to put on a hat that was all about community, collaboration, and conversations, and they couldn't live any other way. I think we get a lot more things done. So when I say those three words, which one of them resonates the most for you and why?
So as I think about those three words, the one that pops for me, because I think it does encompass the others, is conversation, right? So the idea of being able to sit across the table and having a conversation with somebody face to face, eye to eye, getting a sense for what's up, going on with them, have that conversation. I think that's important. That's a form of collaboration. It's a form of community as well, right? And so, and it's a form of connection. One of the things, if I go back and think about social media, has its place, but I also think it's kind of had a bit of an erosion factor on some of that, on some of actually all three of these particular pieces. So to answer your question directly, conversation, that's the one.
And I mean, you just nailed what I believe, and that is, I think social media is great. I'm an active user. I think the tools are fantastic, but we have to realize that it's, I talk to a lot of young professionals, and they don't know how to talk to other people. I was having a conversation with a young tech executive the other day, and we were talking about how I met my wife, and I met her, out for the evening with some friends. I was at a bar, and there was a pretty girl, and I talked to her, and he's like, I would never go out. He goes, you actually just went up and had a conversation. And, this was a young, pretty smart young tech executive. And, he was single. He was trying, he goes, no. And he was explaining that he wouldn't go with anybody if they hadn't swiped and chatted for a long time. And I said, I don't know, sometimes the serendipity of just having a conversation with somebody, is a pretty good thing. And I think that's true in personal, but I also think it's very, very true in business. So I think you're right that, if we can get back to having more conversations, I think we can move a lot of things forward.
Yeah, no, I think we've all had the experience that there's different, different cohorts, different age groups, and being able to effectively manage across those. So, any particular organization, you may have Gen X's, Gen Y's, Boomers, Gen Z's, all right. And they all have different communication styles, different communication methods, different communication priorities. And, being able to effectively understand those motivators, I think makes makes us better leaders. Better just citizens, I guess, right?
Well, and you bring up an interesting thing is they do have different communication styles. They were brought up in different ways. We were brought up with different tools and experiences. And I think all of us, no matter if we're 65 years old or 22 years old or everything in between, I think we have to be equally respectful of the fact that everybody's coming from a different place, and we need to learn to be able to communicate in a lot of different ways, rather than thinking, well, you've got to do it my way. I think if we have those conversations and we can talk, we all
absolutely.
Win. Yeah. All right.
We're all doing our best here, man.
That's right. All right. So last question for you. If you had a friend come to Austin, I mean, heck, George, you've lived here 25 years. If you had a friend come to Austin, they've never been here before, they were only going to be here for 3 days, where's the one place you would take them in Austin?
Oh, wow. Great question. So the place right now that I think is really interesting is kind of, I like South Congress, in the South Congress area. It's a great place to spend. You can spend an afternoon walking around, getting something to eat, doing some shopping and whatnot. And interestingly, I know just in the last couple of years, it's actually changed quite a bit, right? It's upscaled some. There's lots of new stores, bigger brands, but there's also Gueros. There's also, shops and stuff. So I think there's an interesting mix of old and new, right? So I think plus the thing that I was thinking about as well, it also provides a pretty awesome vantage point looking straight up Congress into downtown Austin, seeing the Capitol, which is, again, the second largest Capitol in the world outside of the Capitol in DC. So that's impressive. So I think that's definitely, if I were to say three things, that would probably be definitely one of the three things.
No, I think that's a great choice. Well, George Bonelli, thank you so much for being a guest here on Austin Tech Connect. Any last words?
I just want to say thanks to you, Thom Singer. I appreciate the opportunity, and hook 'em horns, I guess, right?
Always, even though I'm not a Longhorn, I cheer for him. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you again for being here. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? If it wasn't for the audience listening to the show, why would we do that? So I want to thank all of you for tuning in, but do me a favor. Tell all your friends in tech that this is the place they need to be so that they can learn from a lot of different people in our eclectic tech scene. And if your company is not a member of the Austin Technology Council, why not? 2024 is the perfect year to get involved and support what we're doing as we look towards the future. We would welcome your involvement, and we would like for your executives to add their voice to our tech community as we look into the next decade. Please join the Austin Technology Council today.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.